Let's get welcome. Well, just before I introduce our guest today, I want to make sure that everyone stays tuned in right to the very end. Jill's got a little bit of a exciting announcement for us, or maybe it's not an announcement, but she's got an event coming up. And I've asked her to talk about the event. So she's going to give us the skinny on all the details coming up with Junto Talks. Hey, I got that right.
Good job.
I've been practicing Junto all morning, and I didn't get it right till Jill got here and taught me how to do that. Anyway, our guest today is Jill Poulton from Transformational Leadership. She's an executive coach, a leadership coach, a supporter, a mentor, a leader, an advisor, a trusted friend. The list goes on and on. Welcome, Jill. I am so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Barb. It's good to be here.
Very good. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Where did you come from?
Where'd I come
Why are
from?
you here?
Well, I'm a prairie girl,
All right.
born and raised. Yeah. Yeah, I am. I'm born and raised here in Regina, and leadership has always kind of been my thing. You hear lots of memes or see lots of memes about, don't tell the little girl that she's bossy because she's a leader. That was me. I was the little bossy girl growing up.
Welcome to my world. Excellent. I'm going to like this conversation.
And so anyway, as an adult, it just became something that was of interest to me, something that I kind of got good at, not just in my world, but being able to share what I was learning and what I was doing with other people, because I've also had a bend for teaching.
Okay.
And then when I was in the corporate world, I was introduced to this idea of coaching. And I was given some quality tools, coaching tools that I was able to add to my leadership toolkit.
Okay.
And being able to use those tools in meaningful ways really made a difference.
Yes, in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
That is so important, right? To have a toolbox full of stuff that you can't use. Yeah, it's useless.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the converted there. But that may have happened a time or two.
So yeah, so I was in the corporate world for a number of years, and after the birth of my second son, the world the financial world changed, right? It was, 2008, the mortgage market made a huge impact on the economy, and I was working for a bank at the time. And after my son was born in 2009, and then when I came back in 2010, the world had changed. Okay. Anyway, long story short, saw the writing on the wall, made the decision to leave corporate. And because of my talents and success, my track record with coaching and training, specifically in the areas of leadership, it was a good time for me to venture into my own leadership development practice.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so that was in 2011, and I've been doing it ever since.
Got it. Excellent. So one of the things that I heard you talk about as you were giving us kind of your story is being able to share the value of sharing that story, right? And that's something that I've become acutely aware of, I think, in the last little while, because when you can share a personal or a passionate story with someone, it helps them understand your why so much more than if you just say, I do this, right? There's no story behind that. So is that something that you find yourself working on? How do you share your story? How do you help others share their story? Because again, that definitely helps leaders. How do you do that?
Well, I tell you, telling stories or sharing stories was not something that I was accustomed to leaving the corporate environment. It was something that I learned as an entrepreneur. Okay. And I would also say I'm continuing to learn as an entrepreneur. Storytelling isn't necessarily something that I come naturally by, so to speak, in the professional world. Like, I'm a storyteller in my personal life, but it's not something that, necessarily translates into my professional life as easily as I think it could. Right?
So, that's what's interesting to me, because I'm the same. I can tell stories to family and friends, probably ad nauseum, and in fact, probably to the point where they wish I would stop. But when you bring that into the corporate environment, the work environment, the client environment, it doesn't translate. And that's something that I don't know, just personally, I find that very interesting that it doesn't transpose. Any thoughts on why?
Yeah, because most corporate cultures it's all about business.
Okay.
And it's only been in the last decade that stories or this idea of storytelling has started to permeate the corporate culture. So traditionally, it hasn't been part of, the way of doing business, storytelling, unless you were specifically talking about marketing.
Right.
Right. In marketing, yeah, everybody knows that you need to tell some sort of story.
Right.
But inside the corporate culture, not so much. So I think it's still this relatively new idea that people are getting used to. It kind of falls into the bucket of those soft skills.
Right. Yes. Right? Which we're recognizing are so much more important.
Don't necessarily get the amount of attention that they deserve. Right. They're not appreciated or valued to the same extent as some other skill sets.
Right.
Right. So I put the storytelling and the story sharing in that bucket of soft skills.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense to me. Okay. So 2008, your son is born. The markets have changed. You decide it's time for Jill to go out on her own. How did you decide what you wanted to do? What was your burning passion inside that said, this is what I need to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I necessarily approached it that way.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, I've always had this bend for teaching people, and then that morphed into coaching.
Okay.
And it was just something that I super enjoyed doing. Like, it lights me up when I'm doing those things.
Okay.
And it was also something that I was able to see a noticeable difference in the people that I was working with when I was in that place of coaching or training, right?
Okay.
And so when the time came to leave corporate, it was a seed that was actually planted by a friend that I met through the Regina Women's Network while I was still in corporate, even before I got pregnant with my second son. She said, Jill, have you ever considered doing this for yourself with other people? Because at the time, other people outside of the corporation were wanting to work with me, but they didn't like me doing things, outside the bricks and mortar.
Right.
And so anyway, so that seed planted in fertile soil, and it just started blossom. And a mentor of mine in the corporate world, she left a few years prior.
Okay.
And she was doing this. She was doing it in Calgary. And I saw the work that she was doing, and I saw the joy that she was having, and that she was really able to create her own economy. And so I thought, okay, I can do this too. And what really solidified the possibility for me was the same week that I handed in my resignation.
Okay.
My mentor at the time, mentor from a distance, John C. Maxwell. He launched his team the same week. Like, we're talking 48 hours apart. And I had been following John for years.
Yes.
And applying what he writes about and applying what he speaks about, not just in my own career and in my own life, but I was sharing it with others.
Okay.
And so when he launched his team, the same time that I handed in my resignation, I was like, okay, there's serendipity at work here.
No kidding.
Right. And so I became part of his team, which gave me even more tools, more resources.
Yes.
And it also gave me a community of people, like my tribe, right?
Yes.
And
your peeps.
that made a huge difference too. So that's how it came to be. Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting to me, because one of the things that I quickly learned when I became an entrepreneur is, in the corporate world, you talk about it being lonely at the top, but when you're an entrepreneur, it's lonely at the coffee shop, at the kitchen table, in your office, wherever you call home, it's lonely. If there's a problem, you got to start to figure it out and solve it. And not having that team, that tribe of people to immediately talk to, that was really hard at first. And then I just started bending my husband's ear all the time. And no, you have to listen. Right. But it's not quite the same. So, I have to think that with John launching his team at that time, that must have just been fortuitous for you.
Oh, it was incredible. And, at the time we were I mean, there was less than 1,000 of us globally.
Okay.
And we were like 1,000 people globally. So we were just sparse. We were spread out all over the place.
Yes.
And the only place that we were able to connect until our first conference was online. Right.
Oh, okay.
And even then, until, I mean, today, here we are 8 years later, and the John Maxwell team is now almost 20,000 people worldwide.
Wow.
So there are other people here in Regina, but on those first few years, you know, like you said, you crave that human connection, that human interaction.
Yes.
And I was craving it, you know, as an extrovert, right?
Yeah.
I was really, that was one of the things that I was missing tremendously from the corporate world, was that camaraderie. And so I had this idea in my brain that rattled around for probably a year before I took action. And you used the word earlier, and it was the Junto. And so 5 years ago, I launched the Junto group.
Okay.
And the only reason why I was able to do that is because I came across this website that was called meetup.com. And I was like, what the heck is meetup.com? And it was the answer to the question of, okay, I've got this great idea, but how am I going to facilitate it? Because scheduling all these meetups was like, that would be time consuming to be plugging it into my website all the time. And it just was overwhelming administratively. So then when meetup.com showed up on my computer, I was like, hey, this is the answer that I need. And question. So I launched that November, I can't remember what it was. It was the first Friday in November of 2014.
So we probably just passed that 5-year anniversary.
Just passed the 5-year mark. And then the word Junto.
Yes, it's
spelled Junto. So people often say it's Junto, but it's a Spanish word. So the J is pronounced with an H. Junto. And it translates together or gathering.
Okay.
And the word, because I'm not Spanish, I mean,
really, your red hair didn't give it away to me at all.
But the word was inspired by Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
And Benjamin Franklin, if anybody's familiar with his story, he ran a Junto group for like 20 years. It was Friday nights. It was a group of prominent men in Philadelphia at the time, and they would look at things like politics, business, economy, philosophy. I mean, anything that was required to create this new America.
Right.
And anyway, and Benjamin, he organized this gathering every week. He would facilitate a dialogue through a series of questions based on a topic of that week.
Okay, so the topic would be assigned in advance.
Yes. And then the members of the Junto group would have to come and contribute to the topic. Now, he was pretty hardcore, and we didn't have the distractions that we have today.
No.
And so he would assign people essays. And this was it was huge. They would meet like for 4 or 5 hours every week on a Friday night. Wow. This was their life. And anyway, so I took about 10% of that and created the Leadership Junto, where we talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, and success mindset, because there's so much overlap in those 3 areas. And those are the areas that I operate in as an expert. So, so every week, a lot of the people that attend are entrepreneurs. And we have a topic every week. I come prepared with a series of questions. Do we get through all of them? No, because it's only an hour.
Exactly.
But the conversation and the transformation that happens in the space of that hour is actually quite mind-blowing.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've been doing that for 5 years.
5 years.
So like weekly, 5 years, 52 meetings a year, give or take a few summer ones.
Yeah.
That's 250 meetings.
Roughly, yeah.
Topics, right? Planning, preparation. Now, meetup.com doesn't exist anymore, does it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Oh, does it? Okay. Yeah. For some reason, I thought it was gone.
They've gone through some changes over the years because I think they've been bought. Well, they were bought at least once, maybe twice since I started using that platform. But they're still around. They're still used. And in fact, the majority of people, and this is an observation, the majority of people that use it are people who are new to Regina.
Oh,
So a lot of
okay.
larger city centers are
Mhm.
familiar with the platform.
Yes.
And they utilize it, whereas in Regina, it's still this emerging thing. However, I will
Yes.
say, when I first started using Meetup, there was only, I think, maybe 4 or 5 groups
Okay.
on it. And
Mhm.
now there's like, I can't even count how many. There's so many.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's
I think
fantastic.
maybe that's why I thought they were gone, because I know I used to get their weekly updates for everything that was happening in Regina, and it got to be too much. I couldn't filter it down to, what might be of interest. And so I think I unsubscribed, and
There you go.
it all went away. So if somebody
Yeah.
wanted to attend one of the Friday morning meetings, do they need to contact you? What do they do?
Yeah, well, so they can follow along on meetup.com
Okay.
and just search Leadership Junto and you'll find us.
Junto.
Junto, that's right. And then you'll see what the topic is for that week. We always meet at 9:30 on a Friday, like 9:30 in the morning. We start, I try super hard to start on time and keep it to 1 hour because we all have busy lives.
Yes.
And we meet at Sweet Bakery and Coffee Shop, which is
delicious.
Right on the corner of Broad and College, and in the private room. And so you show up. Right. And just be prepared to meet some great people and have some really meaningful conversation and stretch your thinking.
Yes. So let's go down that path, because I mean, from the listener standpoint, how can you help me be a better leader?
That's a great question. Well, I can't give you a blanket answer.
Okay.
Because I would have to get to know you first.
Yes.
And find out.
And we don't need to do a live coaching session with Barb.
Although that would be really super interesting.
Maybe that's
Barb.
the 50th show we talked about. Live coaching with Barb.
I like to get to know where people are at and where they want to be.
Okay.
Right. A lot of the work that I do with my clients, we start with self-leadership.
Oh, and that's the hardest.
Right.
If you can lead yourself, you can lead others. But leading yourself, sticking to that, I don't know, diet, exercise plan, commitments. Yeah, like it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you can learn to lead yourself first, it absolutely makes leading others so much easier.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you aren't going to bump into challenges and issues.
Well, of course.
But I'll tell you, you are better equipped and you have greater fortitude to ride some of those challenges that come your way when you're leading others.
Exactly.
Right? So we always start with self-leadership, then looking at leading others, and that leading others, if that's your one person team or 20 people team, or if it's an entire organization, right? We put that into perspective based on who the client is and what's happening in their world, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there are basic leadership principles that we will look at first, and we'll do kind of an assessment around, and then we figure out the game plan.
Right. So most of the folks that you're working with then, it's obviously one-on-one work or your group programs on Friday morning. So they're working one-on-one with you. And do you find that most people come and say, Jill, I want to be better at X? Or do they simply come to you and say, Jill, I know I can do better. Can you help? Like, how do people approach you? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because half my clients are entrepreneurs. And so as an entrepreneur, most of them are like, okay, I want to be doing this with my business, but I'm getting stuck.
Yeah.
Right. Or I've got the other half of my clients are in an organization, big or small business, and they've got a team of people.
Okay.
And they're looking at their team of people and saying, okay, either we're not maximizing the potential or the performance with these people, and I need to do better, right? Or I keep bumping into this wall.
Okay.
And how do I get past it, right?
Yep.
So they're getting stuck.
Okay.
And a lot of it is stuck in their own thinking, stuck in their perspective. And so we need to get it unstuck. Lots of times, whatever the situation is, it's a story that we're telling ourselves, either about ourselves or about the person or about the situation.
Yes, that self-talk piece.
So we're, earlier we're talking about stories, right? Well, we tell ourselves stories all the time.
All the time.
They're not just necessarily stories that serve us well.
Yes.
Right?
And in so many cases, they're not even true stories, but they're stories we've convinced ourselves are who we are.
Yeah.
Because society told us, our parents told us, here's the role we were supposed to play. And so, these stories play over and over and over in our head.
Yeah.
How the heck do you kick those out?
Yeah. So I act as a thinking partner.
Okay.
Right. So people will tell me what their challenges are. And then through a coaching conversation, which is very question-based and curiosity-based, I help expand their awareness to see what's going on from different angles.
Okay.
Right. And to challenge some of their assumptions that they're making either about themselves or about the situation.
That's very insightful, Jill. I like that. One of the things that I've always admired about our conversations, you and I, is you ask insightful questions, but you ask such good open-ended questions. So a leader's ability to ask the right question or an open-ended question, especially when there is any kind of conflict happening, is really key. And I'm always great at making statements. My kids will tell you that, hands down. But being able to ask the right question, that's a skill. Is that something how do you get better at that? Do you any ideas on that?
That's a great question because it's something that I've had to develop. So of course, as a coach, when you're going through coach training, you learn how to ask better questions.
Okay.
But I have to say, what has transformed my ability to ask great questions was to focus on developing my listening skills.
Yes, listen first.
Yeah. And that started even before I started coach training. Being able to listen, because I'm a talker. I just said I'm an extrovert, right? So I like to talk a lot.
You can tell I'm really having to work hard to get her talking today.
And so I got some feedback one time, and I realized, okay, I need to do less talking, more listening. And listening is more than just the auditory.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So I created an acronym, and folks, here's my gift to you today. If you got a pen and paper, write this one down. It's LOL. See, it's easy to remember because most people think laugh out loud. And I redefined it as listen, observe, and learn. Listen, observe, and learn. So you're listening to what's being said and listening to what's not being said.
Okay.
But then you're also observing the person or the situation, right?
Yes.
And you're noticing the cues, the body language, the facial expressions, the tone, all the intangible stuff sometimes. And then you're putting it all together, and you have to ask yourself, okay, so what is the deeper meaning going on? What is the goal behind the goal? What is the message behind what's being said? What is and just learning. To learn, you have to become curious. And so you start asking yourself these questions, and then you're listening and you're observing for the answers, right? And then sometimes you can't observe or hear the answers. You have to ask the question.
Exactly.
Right. And so LOL has really served me so well for so many years. Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I find is you're having a conversation with somebody, you're listening. We're always thinking about how we're going to respond. When we stop thinking about how we'll respond and we actually focus on the conversation, it actually, not that this is a bad thing, but it slows the conversation down because we're not knee-jerk responding to whatever the other person said, whether it's, a conflict or just an everyday conversation.
Yeah.
By listening to you and not thinking about what I need to say next, I'm much more engaged in the conversation, right? And that creates a much more valuable and rich conversation that I can now learn from you. I will take LOL and I will take it home and I will remember it. And, hopefully I'll practice it a time or two.
And to that point, when we're listening and we're thinking, okay, what am I going to say next? What am I going to do? We're very self-focused when we're in that mindset.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? But if I come and I'm with the intention of the LOL, the listen, observe, and learn, where's my focus? My focus is on you.
Yes, that's right.
So we remove ourselves from the equation and we become a participant of the equation.
Right, exactly.
Right? And so we're able to serve people better from that posture than if we're just thinking about, okay, what do I need to say? What do I need to ask? What do I, how am I, right? And you're just waiting for the next opportunity to talk and, so.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, now it's going to be my turn. So I need something to say. And yes, back and forth. We only have, oh goodness, we only have a couple. Jill, we only have a couple minutes left.
We knew this was going to go by fast.
I was going to ask you one more question, but I'm not. So, Jill, quickly tell us how people can find you if they want to learn more about you, your coaching practice, or Junto Talks.
So, JillPoulton.com, JillPoulton.com. That's how you can find me. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn. I get around online. In a good way.
She said that.
In a good way. And so if you're interested in learning more about Junto, I already mentioned meetup.com. We're on Facebook. Now, Junto Talks is a celebration of community. It's an evening on November 21st at the U of R College Avenue campus.
Awesome.
In the evening from 7 to 9 p.m. We are going to be featuring 6 speakers from inside our Junto community.
Very nice.
And they each have an incredible story to tell of how they faced adversity in their life and they were able to transform that adversity into a gift.
Very nice. That sounds like a fantastic event.
Yes.
Jill, I have to wrap us up today. Thank you so much for being here. This was a fantastic conversation. And yes, we both knew it was going to go so quickly. Absolutely. I will be back here on November 27th, 2 weeks from today, with Wendy Turner-Larsen from Turner-Larsen Consulting. And she's going to talk to us a little bit more on this concept of connection. So Jill and I kind of started the conversation today, but we're going to continue that conversation with Wendy. In our society now, I think it's one of the key things that we're all looking for is more connection. So Wendy, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at barb@googlegirl.ca, or you can reach out on Facebook and Instagram at Above the Fold Canada. Just a reminder, you can also submit your questions in advance of our live show on our Facebook page. I'm your host, Barb McGrath, local business owner and Google Girl. You worked hard for your success. That's supposed to be, remember, you worked hard for your success. Don't keep it a secret. Bye for now.